So, part two, if you're still here, if you still care. If not, I talk to myself a lot anyway, so it won't be a problem. But guys, mention my own personal background in the sport, and Dale said one of the things he'd like to know is my own personal favourites. Now, that I find is always something that is difficult because it's personal favourites. I've met so many people, watched so many people, commentated on so many people that it's very difficult for me to do this because I don't want to upset people. But let's have a go. So, kickboxing terms, many greats over the years here, and I'm going to pick favourites. As I said, I don't want to upset anyone because I've known and made great friends with many. But in kickboxing terms, my all-time favourite and my father's all-time favourite is John Orchard. Beautiful technician, great boxer, and he was also a stopper. He could put you away. And I was there for the incredible bout, Franz Zucala, one of the biggest fights within kickboxing history, and a real bragging rights fight for the best in England. And John was going into the Dragon's Den. He was going to the home area for Franz Zucala and was a real underdog in that fight. And I was talking to Paul Hennessy, and I said to Paul, I think John's going to win. He said, oh, Mark, no, it's Franz all the way. Now, Franz Zucala would have made my list. He's a great champion. But that was one of the best performances put in by a British kickboxer by John Orchard that night. And he won that bout, and for me cemented his legacy on that night against Franz Zucala. And I was privileged to see most of John's fights, either emceeing him, commentating on him, doing both. And real privilege for me, and my father, as I said, his favourite fighter. Now for me, I love technicians. I love the hands and feet together. You had boxers that threw a few kicks, you had kickers that threw a few punches, and then you had what I wanted to see, the guys that could just flow in combination. None better than the leader of the Lawsons, John Lawson. What a phenomenal talent. Not a concussive puncher, but he could still stop you with the flow of those techniques. And he rarely got hit. He was like Prince Nassim in that respect, could hit you and hit you and hit you, but rarely got hit back. So John Lawson is right on that list. My own Chris Long, as I said, I'm biased, I thought was an incredible fighter. But I remember also a great promoter, Steve Gosden, set up another Battle of Britain, which was our boy Chris Long, who had, as I said, who had unified so many titles, against Marty Cox's boy, Marty Cox Jr., one of the nicest young men you would ever meet in kickboxing. And it really was a big battle, and we genuinely felt Chris could win it. We genuinely felt Chris could stop Marty Cox Jr. First round, he was all over him. Second round, the body snatcher struck, and I knew Marty was hurt. He went back to his corner, hurt to the rib cage from the bangs that Chris could give. We said to Chris, you stay there, you hassle him, don't let him flow, beat him up, bully him. Fighter, boxer, boxer, fighter. We were going to fight a boxer. And I was convinced, I said to Simon, if he keeps this up, he'll stop Marty in 4. Brilliant plan. No fault to it whatsoever. Marty was hurt. And for the next 10 rounds, Chris never laid another glove on him. Obvious points victory for Marty. And I loved the fact, if it wasn't against our lad, the way he adapted after being hurt. Chris, always got a soft spot for him. He's my lad. But Marty, after being hurt in that second, showed what a true champion can do by switching like that. Probably winning 8 of the next 10, drawing 2. Chris was so upset after that bout. He had the tools. But we always say, like, you don't make out it's a bad day. Credit your opponent with his ability to switch and change and adapt. Anybody can do it on paper, but there's an opponent in front of you. And I'll never forget the way Marty Cox Jr. took that fight, and for me cemented his reputation as one of my favourites of all time. Now, I'm not going to do this very often, but I'm going to say one of the lads in that league at the moment, a young man that's taken my breath away, is Blaine Dillon Wilson. Got all that technique like John Lawson, all that ability, and yet he's still so young. Scares the hell out of me, that young man's ability, one to watch. Thai boxing, always grateful to Ali Jacko for setting up Now's the Time Night of Combat, and Master Sken, who I'm glad to give credit to here today, finally, for setting up such great shows, treating me like royalty when I arrived there to do the commentary work and the MC, with the man himself, Sandy Holt. Great days with Sandy doing the commentary, and great times as well. And not many people know this, as much as my dad loves everything else, Thai boxing and Master Sken Show were his favourites. And I'll get to his favourite fighter just a bit later. But I'm going to go with three again. And for me, Andy Howson was a lion heart. Andy was never in a bad fight. That's why he drew such a big crowd. Live or die on the shield. We called our club Spartans. Andy was a Spartan. He'd take you out or get taken out. There was no middle ground with Andy. He took you out more than he got taken out. But he drew a big fan club because he never took a backward step. People loved him for it. I loved commentating on him for it. Never in a bad fight. By contrast, Damien Traynor, what a technician. What a clever fighter. People forget how many people he could stop as well with the range of his technique, the quality, the speed, the timing. And Damien, for me, was like watching John Lawson in the kickboxing world. Such an intelligent fighter. Always a pleasure to watch him. And then on to my dad's favourite, and I've got to be honest here, as I said, I don't like doing this because there's so many people. But Liam Harrison, fantastic boxer when he was Thai boxing early, knocking people out. And then he transitioned. And I remember after one show pulling him aside and saying, Liam, you're not doing your boxing anymore. You're not boxing anywhere near as much. And he said to me, Malcolm, I want to become the complete package as a Thai boxer. Boxing's not enough. And you know what he did? And then when he became the complete package, he brought the boxing back in. Almost unstoppable. This man's career across the world, international fights and at domestic level, he's still going now because he was so young when he started. But for me, in any other industry, bona fide superstar, genuine legend. And if it was boxing, he'd be worth millions. My dad's favourite fighter, hand on heart, one of mine. What a representative for this country. Now, when I was first with combat, which will be for another episode, I covered a lot of the semi-contact and points fighting. People go in the full contact world used to mock it. I realised that skills, now everybody's realising it, but back in the day I realised that skills were transferable. These were skilled fighters. And just because they didn't do full contact didn't mean that they couldn't do full contact. That's a difference. They could. Their skill set and their rule set just mean they didn't. But I could see those transferable skills. Some incredible fighters. And two of the three I'm going to mention prove that by going on to have incredible careers in full contact as well, which proves the point. My favourite of all time, though, is the man himself, Mr. Sean Vieira. I mean, what a cool dude. 1 point down, 2 points down, 10 seconds left, 8 seconds left. You put your money on him. The man was ice cold. His timing, his precision, and his speed, remarkable. And he always pulled it out. It was a joy to watch. Loved watching him. What an incredible ambassador. What a great coach. One of my all-time favourites. Alongside that, as I mentioned, MVP Michael Venom Page. From early days when he was, in my terminology, a nipper. You knew there was something special about him. A showman. Timing, unorthodox, played to the crowd. Marmite, love him or hate him, he knew what he was doing from an early age. And again, those skills have transitioned time and time again to full contact. The same with Raymond Daniels. Not as flamboyant as Venom, but flamboyant still. Great finisher, great technician, fantastic cardio, and an absolute beast on the mats. Of course, there's your Alfie Lewis's. I can't, there's just so many, but I'm on about my personal favourites. People that I saw week in, week out that I really enjoyed and enjoyed watching. Now on the ladies' side, I'm going to mix it up. Our very own Domi Oatley, being biased here, but as a full contact kickboxing champion, she only lost her debut, vowed never to again, went through her career undefeated, was a beast, and an incredible career right up to title level. In Taekwondo, I had the pleasure of working with, on a show called Fight School, Rebecca Riggs. And in Taekwondo, did absolutely everything and anything asked of her. And the quality of a true champion, it's time after time after time. And Becky did that. Now, across all disciplines, my all-time favourite fighter, and she had a great sense of humour because I always called her Frodo, which is unfair. I know she's short. I think she's about 3'7", but it's still not right, especially not nowadays. Sorry, snowflakes. But I called her the Hobbit, and it's Sharon Gill. Now, Sharon, for me, had absolutely everything. And at the peak of her career, which wasn't just a year or 2 years, was like 6 or 7 years, was almost untouchable. I've never seen someone with her timing, her movement, her ability, alongside Sean Vieira, her coach, which says it all. Sharon Gill, for me, had everything. And when we look back, when we're all even older than me, I think in terms of mat fighting, you're not going to get another Sharon Gill. Absolutely wonderful. And at the time as well, you had great showmen, but that when you looked at competition, you had great showmen, but you also had a bulldog that I loved. Again, I love heart and I love spirit, and no one had that more than Chris Collymore. I used to take the mickey out of Chris again for being short, but he knew deep down what I really felt for him. And that man never knew when he was beaten. Didn't matter if he replaced his hip, didn't matter if he was injured. He'd enter everything and he'd put on an incredible showing in everything. So although I was going to stick with 3, I've got to mention the lion-hearted Chris Collymore. And in those days as well, forms were huge. They were part of the circuit, and I'm only going to mention 2 because, again, I think they were legendary. Brian Beck's son, Ashley Beck, what a performer, stunt performer now in the movies, incredible. And for me, the all-time great, Chloe Bruce, who's now making a huge career in huge Marvel movies because her ability is phenomenal. Those 2, I would stop reporting to watch when they came on the forms. They were that good. Now, in professional terms, if I look at my favourites of all time, let's look at some of them. Boxers. First love was boxing, still love boxing. And now, I'm not necessarily saying these were the absolute best, but they were my absolute favourites. And I've got to say, the absolute best and favourite, you can combine the 2, Muhammad Ali. I don't need to say any more, do I, guys? Hey? Nigel Benn. Again, I love heart. Knockout artist. Only one way to fight. He's going to take you out, or you're going to take him out. But one way or the other is going to be exciting. Never, ever was that shown more than in that brilliant but tragic fight with Gerald McClellan. McClellan had him out on his feet. Nigel Benn was out of there until he wasn't. And then that heart dug in. I watch it now. When you watch that bout, knowing what happened to McClellan, it's hard to stomach, but that doesn't take away from the performance. And then for me, just one of the all-time great, Sugar Ray Leonard. Loved this movement, loved this speed, loved this timing, loved this defence. And what a great time to watch the man. The 4 kings, Hagler, Hearns, Duran and Leonard. Leonard was my favourite, but you've got to love all 4. MMA, was very privileged to eventually commentate in that, get into that. Never competed, never trained in MMA. But from the early days of Cage Rage, I was happy to be involved in that as well. And again, not necessarily the best, but personal favourites. Anderson Silva. I mean, that man at Cage Rage, before he went on to become a legend at UFC, he was doing things we'd never seen before, so you had to love him. Matt Hughes, so powerful, so stocky, those suplexes, those moves, that ground game. And he was another one that really captured the imagination. And just like everyone else, I got carried away by the mohawked man, Chuck Liddell. I mean, Chuck was, again, everybody was saying that, in real terms, a limited skill set. No ground game, they said, but he had enough ground game to keep you upright, to knock you out at his peak. And everybody loved Chuck, his character, his celebrations. So again, I have to say, personal favourite. Now, can't leave the MMA without 2 British fighters that for me are legendary within that world. The man himself, the machine, Ian Freeman. His fight with Frank Mir. What? Frank Muir, can you imagine him fighting? Any of you old enough to remember Frank Muir? He really would have killed him. Frank Mir. Total underdog. He was there to make up the numbers. You look at his personal circumstances, the personal tragedy behind that fight, and one of the greatest ever performances by a British fighter in a cage to knock out and stop Mir. Incredible work by Ian. And again, if he was around today, and at his peak today, would be a superstar. and following him, the Count Mike Bisping. How many times had that man been written off, kept going, and became the champion of the world? Now I'm going to leave it there for this episode. I'm going to start my third episode with my favourite K1 fighters of all time. Aren't you the lucky ones?